Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fraternity Foodie. This is Mike Eilon with Greek University, and we are now back in the fall semester. And I took a little time off over the summer to hang with family, see friends, just relax a little bit. And now we are back with the podcast, and so excited for you to join us today. It's now episode number 29 of Fraternity Foodie, where we have some of the difficult discussions, but we also have great guests that will tell us where they like to go to eat in their area of the country. So if you're ever traveling and you want some recommendations, this is the podcast for you. Today, we have an all-star. Her name is Carrie Anton, and I love her title. She calls herself Chief Wonder Woman. I mean, who doesn't want to be Chief Wonder Woman? I mean, let's be real, right? And the name of her company is called Wonder and Idea Studio. So welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on.
Excellent. We're so happy to have you. And let's get right into the questions, because our listeners really need to know what you're all about. So the first thing is, you graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So why did you choose that particular institution, and what was it like going to school there?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Illinois, just over the border of Wisconsin. And my husband, who at the time was not my husband, he and I met in Illinois and went to junior college together. And that's where we started dating. And so we knew we always wanted to transfer to another school. And being in Illinois, the kind of natural place is to go to U of I, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. It's where a lot of our friends went from high school. And so we were like, yeah, we should do that. But we'd kind of already started to have these lives that we were building as adults, I guess, if you will. I'll use air quotes there, because I still barely feel like an adult on most days. But the U of I campus, while beautiful and nothing against it, just wasn't for us in terms of where we had been. We were working full time and going to school full time. And so we were used to being very busy and having lots of opportunities around us. And being in the suburbs of Chicago, there are tons of things to do. And we just didn't feel like U of I was a good fit for us. And so we started looking at other schools. And my husband actually had said, like, oh, let's go look at UW Madison. And I'm like, I don't want to live in Wisconsin. Like, there's cows. Like, we lived so close to Wisconsin that you got that vibe already. And he's like, have you ever been to Madison? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you just need to see it. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And so we went up and we looked at it, and literally I took one walk down State Street, which you can see if you've ever been on State Street, or if you've never been on State Street, it leads right to the Capitol building, and it's an amazing view. And I started welling up right on State Street, and I was like, I'm home. Like, I just felt like I was home. And we walked all of State Street, and we went to the Capitol and toured it. And at the time I was considering some type of career in the legal side of things, which I did not pursue, but standing in front of the Supreme Court room and just like looking in, and I just was like, yep, this is where we're going to school. And we didn't look any further after that. And I think it's a testament to the fact that, I graduated, I'm old, so I graduated in 2000, and 19 years later, we're still living in Madison because it stole our hearts. So I have to say, maybe more than the institution, than the actual town is or the city is what made us kind of move here.
That's a fantastic story. I graduated in 97, so that makes me older. And I will say to you that I've spoken twice at UW Madison, and every time I get the same sense that you got just looking around. It is one of the most picturesque campuses and cities that you'll ever see. And so if you haven't been to Madison, don't believe the hype. Go for yourself and go check it out. And you'll see the two lakes, you'll see the views, and you're going to be like, this is it.
Yeah, the lakes are amazing in the summer. We were there more kind of winter time frame, which, I'm not a huge fan of winter anymore, but if you can find a way to get me to overlook the fact that it's just going to be cold and miserable, and I'm going to be walking in that, as a student, like, it has to be a pretty amazing city. So it really did kind of just, stole my heart.
Yeah. Well, as a University of Buffalo graduate, you're not going to get any sympathy from me.
I know. You had it way worse. You had it much worse than I did.
But similar experiences, I'm sure. So that's really great.
Definitely.
So in terms of your career, you've spent a lot of your time as an editor and over 7 years working as an editor at American Girl on advice and activity book projects. So what was it like working for this big entity, American Girl?
Yeah, so I actually got my degree in English. And so after I had decided that law was not for me, I really wanted to go into like the magazine book route and content. And I did that pretty much straight out of college. And it eventually led me to American Girl, where I was working. I started there as a web editor, working on their like just for fun site for girls, and then eventually was moved over to the nonfiction advice and activity books. And as you can imagine, working for a toy company comes with a little bit of magic, right? Like it's you have a different reason for doing what you're doing, like you keep that girl in mind. She's an 8 to 12-year-old girl. That's not a fun stage of life, in my opinion. But so you try to make it as exciting and help her to, like, you just go back and think about all the things you could have told your 8 to 12-year-old self, and you try to infuse that into the projects that you're working on. And on top of it, I've always been someone who loves to be creative and loves crafting and all of that. And so the books that I got to work on a lot of times were those DIY kind of craft books. And it was just so much fun. Don't get me wrong. It's still the corporation. You're still dealing with, all the stuff that you deal with inside of, a normal business. There's still hoops to jump through. There's still, bureaucratic stuff. But at the end of the day, that the work that you get to do, that was really what sold me.
That's fantastic. And then just like me, you decided, enough of the bureaucracy.
Yes.
Let's start my own company and just kind of chart my own path. And so I've done a lot of that. I've worked on the corporate side and now obviously have my own company. So I totally get that. Now you're Chief Wonder Woman at Wonder and Idea Studio. So what types of services are you offering today at Idea Studio?
So with that, I really go into creative training, and that's the focus. So I really pull on a lot of that kind of American Girl experience, especially on the brainstorming side of things, because at American Girl, that is something we did really well, and that was brainstorming, because we always had to come up with new products, new, books, new toys, that kind of thing. We had to stay on trend with what was happening, not only in the marketplace for toys, but also what's happening in kids' lives that they need to deal with, because we always came at it, they always called it the vitamins in the chocolate cake. That's sort of like their angle, is that they want it to be something that's going to be useful for them. And so we did brainstorming in very creative and innovative ways. And so I learned a lot while I was on staff, and I adapted, and kind of came up with some of my own things. And I now am offering that to other people. I want to be able to help them come up with good ideas for their businesses. Brainstorming is kind of a unique art. I think a lot of people think you just stand at a whiteboard and say, well, what else do you have? What else do you have? And honestly, that's not going to get you very far. And so what I'm offering, through that kind of service of an ideation service, is to be the facilitator, to be the unbiased one in the room and say, okay, like, here are some activities that are going to get our brains thinking in different ways. Because at the base of all brainstorming is perspective and questions, and it's asking the right questions, and it's about looking at things from different angles, and angles that you might not have considered. And so that's a big part of what I offer. But I also do a lot of public speaking on creative leadership and how creativity plays a role in helping everybody to be better leaders. And then all of that kind of sprinkles into what I call experiential events. And those are just ways of kind of seeing the world through new eyes and learning about the world in ways that can be applied to different business applications.
Wow, that all seems really, really exciting and very needed. I noticed that you just co-authored a book, which
Yeah.
I can't wait to read this book. It's called Me, Myself, and Ideas, the Ultimate Guide to Brainstorming Solo. So for this book that you've written, how is that helpful for somebody who might be self-employed, maybe somebody who is a freelance professional, or maybe somebody who is in college right now and they are an aspiring entrepreneur? How can this book help all of these people?
Yeah, so the book kind of came about. It's actually a co-authored book that I did with my then. I actually started Wonder with a partner at one time. I own it now on my own, but her name is Jessica Nordskog, and she and I co-authored it together. And we had both worked at American Girl. And when we left, we first started with freelancing, her with design and me with writing. And what we found was we no longer had coworkers or teams of people to just like pop in on and be like, I have a problem, I'm stuck, I don't know how to move forward. Now it's all on you. You have to figure that out on your own. And so we figured that with 57 million Americans who are freelancing, and that's a true statistic, like we thought we can't be the only people who are dealing with this problem. But even beyond freelancing, like what you said with college students or anybody who kind of thinks independently, even if they work in like a corporate environment, what this book can do is really to help you have those ideas on your own without having to tap into other people to say like, I need help, because sometimes those people just aren't around, or those people simply aren't invested in what you're doing. So their ideas are going to be like, well, maybe you could do this. And it's like, yeah, it's very surface based, right? But like when you're trying to solve something that you're passionate about, or that, or if there's a grade on the line or whatever, you're looking to get like down and dirty with it. And there's not many people who are going to be willing to do that with you unless they have some sort of commitment to it. And so what this book does is it really walks you through the steps and gives you lots of creative opportunities to think about those problems or, new innovations that you're looking for in very unique and different ways that you might not have thought of before. And what I really like about the book is some of the earlier chapters are, they kind of help you set the stage for everything. But like the brainstorming techniques and the icebreakers and some of the, what we call sit and simmer, when you have the idea, but we tell you not to go forward with it just yet. You got to sit with it a bit. Those pieces can all be like taken in as needed, right? You can just sort of dive in and open to like, oh, this page, this is what I need today, or, flip over here. So it doesn't have to be like, front to back, read and then consumed and then go do something with it. You can really, do little kind of taste tests here and there as you need them.
Mm-hmm. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but really anybody can use this book and anybody can benefit from these techniques that you're teaching in terms of brainstorming. I almost feel like I work with college students, obviously, every single week of my life. And many of them, when I talk about ideation and I talk about brainstorming, they'll say to me, well, I'm just not good at coming up with new ideas.
Right.
And it's like, well, I think this is a skill that everybody needs to have to unlock this. And I think everybody has this ability. You might need to go off into the woods where you get no cell service and go for a walk or whatever. And I think that's different for everybody. But ultimately, I think anybody has this ability to brainstorm. Am I right?
Absolutely. And it's funny. So you talked about, I'm the chief Wonder Woman, and I do play up that Wonder Woman angle quite a bit, because when I got started with all of this, I always felt like my superpower was coming up with new ideas and strategies and innovation. But really that lies within everybody. It's something that most people just haven't tapped into. Like I would say that even before, starting any kind of corporate job, I was always a very creative person. But, for me, I always thought of it like, oh, I like to make stuff. I like to knit. I like to sew. I like to do that kind of stuff. Like, how does that apply to a job? It doesn't, right? Unless that's what you do for a living, if you're a master sewer or seamstress or something like that. But if you're working in, a corporate job at a cubicle, like you're going to think that doesn't apply. But it's really just about making the connections between creativity and not seeing it as a craft, not seeing it as a DIY project, but really seeing it as, that, cliche outside the box thinking, and really thinking bigger than just, oh, this is how I've normally done it, or this is how everybody else has normally done it, and it's really about I'm working on this whole kind of idea of rebel leadership. And I was always the resident cynic on staff at most of my corporate jobs, because I was always about poking holes in balloons, is what I call it. It's like letting the air out of things that I think are too inflated. And it didn't always win a lot of votes from managers because I was always sort of like, well, why do we do this? Why do we do this? But at the core of it, all I was doing is asking questions because I thought there were better ways to do what we're doing. And there were better ways to make it more enjoyable. And if nobody ever asks those questions, then you never are going to get there. You're going to keep status quo and you're going to keep moving forward and you're going to find yourself stuck at some point. So it's really just, again, perspective and questioning. Start with those two things and it'll take you so much further. If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, you're going to go farther with an idea, I promise you.
Yeah, that's great advice for our listeners. The other thing that I would say too is if you're a good problem solver, which is really what you're teaching, you're going to be the most respected, you're going to be the highest paid, you're going to be one of the most critical employees in any company in the country. And so I think really you're giving a blueprint for people to learn a skill that will enable them to move up the corporate ladder much faster. And I think this is a skill that everybody needs to learn. So it's critically important and it really will tie directly to your success in the corporate world or even as an entrepreneur doing what you're doing. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it applies in so many different ways to life, personal and professional. And we don't think about it that often, but ideas are everything. Like ideas are used all day long. What you put on as clothing is an idea. How you do your hair, how what you eat for breakfast, how you make it. All of those are essentially ideas. So when you start to break down ideas and creativity as being, these small little things that you're doing every single day, anyway, like if you can go further with it, then why not?
I love it. Now, if we bring this to the fraternity and sorority community, which is most of our listeners, community service and philanthropy, that's really a critical part of fraternity and sorority life on college campuses. So how can we add some creativity to these community service and philanthropy events? Sometimes they get a little bit stale, sometimes they get a little bit old. How can we add creativity to these events to keep the students engaged and focused on the mission at hand?
Yeah, so the philanthropic efforts are just, there's such a foundation of fraternities and sororities. And, but what can happen is because they're done year after year after year, it can be easy to fall into that habit, kind of what I was talking about before, where it's like, oh, well, we've always done it this way, right? We've always grouped together with this organization, and this is what they've always asked us to do. But sometimes there are either other organizations that could benefit or the community in some way. And also there are things that things just change over time. Like what that organization is doing might feel a little stale. What if you offered up something new that could benefit them in all new ways? And so it's really about taking a step back, looking at the big picture of both, your fraternity or sorority, your bigger organization as a whole, and saying, what are our values? What is our mission statement? What are we all about? And asking yourself if the community efforts that you're doing really align with that. Because if they really align with it, great. Everybody should be inspired. But if it starts to feel like, oh, we have to go do this again. Like we did it last year. It was okay. It felt good to give back, all of that. But if it doesn't feel like you made change in the world, well, if there's an opportunity for you to feel that way, wouldn't you want to do that? So for me, it's about coming at it from the angle of how do you want to feel? Simon Sinek is, popular with his YouTube video of, start with why. I believe that. What is your why for going out and doing this community service besides maybe checking a box that you had to do it? If you want to be someone who for a lifetime gives back, and I think we all should be those people at whatever, in whatever way we can, then you need to find a way to be passionate about it. And to be passionate about it, you have to tap into that why, you have to align your values, and you have to start thinking like, well, what would be fun for us to do that people could benefit from? And once you start to work together on that as a whole, like, you're just going to find that the whole philanthropic efforts are just completely like a 180 change of how you feel about doing them. And you're just going to be like, yeah, I can't wait to do it. Like that was so much fun. You might even add more things because of it. So I don't know, creativity can make all the difference in my opinion.
I love how you talk about fun and creativity into these community service events and philanthropy events that maybe we've been doing for years, but maybe it needs that injection of fun in order to engage everybody again. And it seems like, as a side effect, if we could inject fun, if we can inject creativity into these events again, then it seems that we could create stronger bonds between the fraternity members and the sorority members, maybe even start to create a stronger connection to our local community, like places in Madison, right?
Exactly. And so there is a way of, when you're tapping into those values and understanding really at the core of what you do. So like that's right there is a sit down and a brainstorm of like, all right, what are we about? And what does that mean in terms of the work that we can provide or the efforts that we can put out in the community? And now that we have that, who needs them? And why would we work with that organization? How do they align with our values? Now, all of a sudden, everybody's adding their input. And for me, innovation and team building kind of go hand in hand. So, we think of a lot of team building exercises as being awkward and kind of soul crushing. It's like rope courses and things like that. And that is not what it's about, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's about coming up with ideas and building off of them. Because if I throw something out there and you piggyback onto it, well, you've just now become a member of my team. And so as more people start to add in, well, everybody starts to come together as a team and we're all invested in it. And we might not all see eye to eye, but we're all in it to make it a better thing going forward. And so we all have sort of skin in the game, if you will. And so you're starting to build those bonds that way. And then when it comes to your community, well, think of how you're now a united front when you come out. There's not bickering on the site where you're volunteering, or you're not like rolling your eyes. It's like, no, you know why you're doing this and you're doing it for a bigger cause. And so all of a sudden, the community is like, wow, they were amazing. And they're going to share your story with other people. They're going to put it on their website. They're going to say, wow, this fraternity, this sorority came in and we were blown away. We've never had this experience before. And right there, that's a boost of confidence. So you're just hitting all of these wins along the way. And at the end of the day, it's going to mean you're going to feel stronger and more, committed to one another because of it.
100% agree. And I think what you're talking about is really what I talk to my mentor about and what my mentor teaches me all the time, which is building this reservoir of goodwill. You have to build that reservoir of goodwill with your community in Madison. You have to build it with the university, with the administration at the university. There are going to be problems on college campuses. I think we've all kind of realized that and we all recognize that. But the question is, have you built up a good enough reservoir of goodwill with your community, with the administration, to say, you know what, okay, you made a mistake here. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
However, you've done such great work and you've really teamed up with the community. You're making a difference. You're making a positive impact on this college campus. Your grades are better than the average student. All of these things are great indicators. Yeah, you made a mistake over there, but you know what? We're willing to overlook that because we see the big picture.
Right.
So
And it's just there's just so much involved in how you can work together and get through it. There's going to be tough times. College is not an easy road, right? Like you're away from home for the first time. You are kind of experience the world as that kind of, air quote adult. And like you said, mistakes are going to happen. But if you can build a strong community around you, whether it be, your friends, your family, the community, what have you, you're going to always have somebody to fall back on and to help you kind of rise up from it.
yeah. Let's talk about the media since we're talking about
Yeah.
problems and mistakes. I think you can certainly understand this. You're living in a college town. There are problems within Greek life. I'm sure you've read newspapers in town and you've probably seen it even firsthand living in Madison so long. And the media doesn't often report on all the positive things that Greeks bring into their community. And I was just talking about this with an administrator that trend needs to change somehow, some way. So how can we change this narrative to a more positive one that focuses on all the good work that fraternities and sororities are doing?
Yeah. And so I think, again, that kind of goes back to figuring out those core values and how you align, because I think what often happens is we don't want to take responsibility for what happened. Like something bad gets put out there and we want to sweep it under the rug and like talk about something else and be like, hey, we're doing good over here. And that's great. But there's a bigger issue. And if that bigger issue is resonating on other campuses, so it's not just a one-off, right? This is happening over and over again. We've got alcohol abuse, we've got hazing, we've got, sexual abuse. All of these things are happening on campuses, not just in Greek life, obviously, but, across campuses in general. But if we don't address it, then you're just ignoring it. And when you ignore it is when you almost you're not taking responsibility for it. And so you're going to have a negative kind of view of, people are going to have a negative view of you because of it. So why not go back to that community aspect and start saying, hey, we have a problem here, and maybe we need to address it through community service to show that we're aware of what that problem is and we're making efforts to address it in a way that is responsible. Because I think if you were to pair up with an organization, if let's say it's about alcoholism, or too much, too heavily of drinking, if you were to pair up with an organization like Moms Against Drunk Driving or something like that, well, all of a sudden you're showing like, yeah, we care about this too, but we need help from the community. So we want to help these community organizations, but we need them to help us too, because we're not doing this right. And if we're not doing it right, and again, you're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's just producing the same results, well, obviously we need to come at this from another perspective. So maybe instead of, helping at a food kitchen or I'm drawing a blank on organizations right now, but like instead of helping the community in ways that you've done in the past, maybe you go at it from how you're struggling. And so you're kind of going into a raw place, and you're going to learn from it, and you're going to learn from what is happening in those organizations, and it's going to have an impact on your own sort of outlook of like, yeah, this really does need to change on campus. And by partnering with these people, we can help make that change while still giving back. So again, that's where kind of creative thinking and perspective comes into play, because you just need to have that outlook of, we're not doing this right and we need to do something different. And while these other, you can still volunteer at all of those other places that you volunteered in the past, but why not add something that's going to change the narrative? Because everything is a narrative at the end of the day. And so media will pick up on that. It might not happen overnight, but the more you do it, the more you chip away at it, the more they'll see, oh, they're trying.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up a bunch of problems. You talked about sexual assault, you talked about hazing, you talked about alcohol and drug abuse. There's a whole bunch of problems to talk about. So if you're a student leader, is there an easy way for you to brainstorm solutions to any of these problems in a group of, let's say, 50 to 100 college students, fraternity sorority members? How do we brainstorm solutions to something like that?
Yeah. So, my book is about brainstorming by yourself, but I've also been in the group dynamic as well. And so large groups can be difficult, right? Because there's so many voices, and so it can be hard to be heard. And so I kind of take a three-pronged approach here. And so it starts with coming together and, just sort of hearing what is going on and what you got to tackle. You got to first figure out what the goal is, because if everybody's at least understands the goal, they know what they're working toward. And after the goal is understood, it's all about going away and doing some solo brainstorming, coming up with some ideas on yourself, because every group brainstorm, no matter what the size, will always be better if everybody comes to the table with their own ideas. Because what happens if in corporate brainstorms that I've been in, groups of maybe 15 to 25 people, what happens is people like me, the extroverts who can't stop talking, are basically going to drown out the introverts. And studies have shown that introverts probably have better ideas than extroverts, but the problem is they just aren't heard. So if everybody has a chance to come to the table and go around and say, these are my ideas, each person says an idea or multiple ideas or whatever it is, it means that the first idea that is thrown out isn't the idea that everybody runs with. It's no, everybody gets a chance to say something, and then we're going to move forward. There's also different activities that you can do to kind of make that a little bit more fun than just saying it, but for sake of just explanation. After that, it's also going out either during the solo time, or if you pair up into smaller groups, going out into the community, or just going out into different situations. And this is kind of what I call experiential events. It's those learning opportunities of what's happening here, how are they tackling problems of different kinds. It doesn't have to be, the same problems that are happening on campuses, but how is problem solving done in, a small business versus a large business versus this industry versus that industry, and really starting to just see how people tackle things. And then the last stage is to come together as that group and really start to digest everything that's been learned, those ideas that you came up with on your own, what you've been sort of seeing when you've been out in the community, and how they come together and form bigger ideas as a group brainstorm. And with 50 to 100, you're still going to need to break up into some micro groups, but even in those micro groups, you can shift around. And so like one person goes to another group. And so the groups keep changing. So there's lots of ways to tackle it. 50 to 100 does not have to be insurmountable. It can be done. It just, there's just some different tactics that you need to take to make sure that everybody, again, feels like they're being heard and feels like they are, they're in it, and that they want to see this move forward.
I love your idea of the solo brainstorming. And so in terms of tactically what this looks like in a fraternity or sorority chapter, as a tip, I would say that when you send out your agenda for your meeting, let's assuming that you meet every Sunday as a group. When you send out your agenda, hopefully you have an agenda, and hopefully you're sending out that agenda to your members, let's say on Thursday or Friday of that week. So that way everyone has a chance to prepare. And on the agenda, you can say, we're going to brainstorm ideas on how to solve problem X. And when that goes out by agenda, then all of your members have the opportunity to do some solo brainstorming, think about possible solutions, write them down, and come prepared on Sunday to discuss it and voice your idea. That's what it looks like. All right.
Because guess what? When you get into traditional business, this is what is going to be expected of you. Like
100.
Brainstorms in corporations are not your opportunity to think of your idea. They are your opportunity to bring your idea to the table, and you will always impress the people above you if you do that. So instead of being like, I don't know, I need to think about it more. No, come to the table, even if the idea is bad, which I will say, I know we're not supposed to judge ideas at that early stage. I do believe there are bad ideas though. But even if your idea is bad, it shows you put in the effort, and it shows that you gave it some thought. And it's still, there can always be a nugget of something, even in a bad idea, that can go in a direction that people can take and use. So if you come prepared, it will just help all the efforts, no matter what the outcome is that you're looking for.
Amen, sister. All right. So let's say, what's the best way for students to lead? I mean, you talk about leadership all the time. And the problem when we talk about students leading is that the other students in their organization are typically the same exact age. They have the same life experiences up to that point. Maybe not a lot of work experience and things like that. So it's really hard for the leaders of these fraternities and sororities. Let's say you're the president of your sorority. It's hard for you to tell other people, especially when they're your friends, what to do. All right. And we also have this innate need that we all want to be well liked. I think as human beings, we're all wired that same way. So what's the best way for students to lead given these issues?
Well, I think you hit on it when you said, tell them what to do. I would say that's the problem with leadership. Never tell anybody what to do. That's not your job as a leader. I go more in the, I have a talk that I give to people that's called Shut Up and Lead. And it's all about silent leadership. And when it comes to silent leadership, it's about listening. It's about letting other people take the spotlight. It's about really taking a step back and observing the world around you. What is happening? What is the dynamic? What is really at the core of the problem? And so if you can get quiet and really just tune into, like, instead of waiting to talk, how many of us are in conversations where we're just like, okay, they're going to finish talking and then I get to talk, right? Like I'm guilty of that all the time, even though I talk to people and tell them not to be those people. We are all guilty of it. But if you really stop and listen and hear what the person is saying, I promise you, your brain is not going to shut down and you're not going to have anything to say in response. What is happening is now you're just really hearing them. Also, I think when it goes back to that giving people the spotlight, we all have different strengths. Like, even though everybody is probably the same age and sort of same life experiences, our life experiences are still pretty different. Our strengths are different. Some of us are going to be, great at public speaking. Some of us are going to be great at figuring out math problems. Like there's always going to be a component that you bring to the table. If a leader thinks that they can do it all, that's a problem. Instead, they need to see and identify what those strengths are in other people and say, you know what? I'm going to let this person take the lead on this because they're good at it and I know that they are strong at it. Or you can see something in somebody that you maybe want to develop more and just say like, you know what, I think you would be really great at this because of X, Y, and Z. Why don't you give this a hand? I'll help you, or we can pair up with somebody else who might be a good, match for you. But when you give those opportunities to other people to step forward and show themselves and show what they can do, I promise you, they're going to like you a lot more than if you're just standing up there and talking to them and telling them what to do, because all of a sudden it's a shared experience. It doesn't feel, it feels more autonomous. It doesn't feel like there's like a dictator essentially, right? Like we're all working together toward a common good. You just happen to be leading them toward that, but you're doing it by letting everybody have a piece of the pie.
Wow, that's a fantastic answer. I hope our listeners stop the tape, rewind, listen to that answer one more time, just so that way it really soaks in, because that in itself is a lecture that can go on for days, that is just chock full of
Yes.
So I love the answer. It was exactly what I was looking for and what students need to hear in order to figure out how to lead their organization. So the next time that I'm speaking at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I need you to tell me what is the best place that I should go in order to get some local food. Where should I be going to get food? Because I am such a foodie. I love to eat all the time.
Okay, so I love to eat all the time too. And so this was actually a tricky answer because Madison is a great food city. So we have a lot of different food. And, but I will say we have a lot of Wisconsin fare that I think is, there's the cheese curds, there's the bratwurst, there's all the beer, of course, the beer. Like, so one of my favorite places, which I actually didn't even come to know until after college, was actually just down the street from where I lived. I lived just slightly off of campus. It's kind of on the east side. It's called Dexter's Pub, and they have hamburgers. They have burgers, I should say, because they're all different kinds of burgers. They have sandwiches. I usually in most places always have like a usual order when I go in. Like I know like, okay, I go here, this is what I like, this is what I order. I tend not to, stray from it too often. Dexter's is not that way. They always have like today's specials, unless it's Friday fish fry, because Wisconsin loves their fish fries. But their specials, I almost always order a special because I have never found something that I didn't like. And I was all like, everything you read on their specials is like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. I have to have that. So Dexter's Pub, that gets my top vote. But I will say there's probably about another 10 restaurants I could tell you about also.
All right, I'm heading to Dexter's Pub. So now I know where I'm going to eat. I think that's fantastic. So where can our listeners connect with you? Let's say there's a listener and they're listening to you right now. They want to connect with you, whether it be social media, website. Where can they go to connect with you?
Yeah, so the website is wonderideastudio.com, and you can find me on Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook, and it's all at Wonder Idea Studio. You can also email me directly. It's Carrie, Carrie, at wonderideastudio.com. I'm always happy to talk to people and always happy to help them kind of find their way in whatever ways they need. So always reach out. I'm happy to talk.
That's fantastic. Carrie, you are a rock star. I love what you're doing. I love that we were able to connect and share this experience together. And I look forward to working together with you in the future. So let's figure out ways that we can work together some more. And, just keep up the great work. I'm just a huge fan. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and right back at you. I love Greek University. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm so happy to have connected with you and kind of start this journey. So happy to see where it leads.
Sounds great. And thank you to the audience. Thank you for listening to us. Please share this videos with this video and other videos in terms of other people that you think might be interested in hearing this message. And we appreciate you listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.